Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thanks, as always, for tuning in. We've got a lot to unpack in this week's show. Two-time world welterweight champion Shawn Porter will be joining us, and fresh off his impressive TKO victory over Ronald Ellis Saturday night on Showtime, David Benavidez will drop by as well. We'll also review that entire card. And this week, in our toe-to-toe section, we're going to unveil our personal top 5 favorite PBC fights of the past 5 years. You don't want to miss that. But first, the boxing world suffered a huge loss last Saturday. Hall of Fame great, marvelous Marvin Hagler died at age 66. Hagler, of course, gave us so many memories over the course of his career during the golden era of the 1980s. Mike, what can you tell us about Hagler?
Well, absolute legend, one of the unforgettable four kings with Thomas Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. I tried to convey this in a column that I wrote. In the ring, it was impossible to take this guy out. Nobody was tougher. I mean, nobody. Nobody had a better chin. It just wasn't possible to take this guy out. He was just a rock. So when a guy like that dies, especially at only 66, it's particularly shocking. It was really stunning and ultimately depressing. I'm not sure I've seen a combination of ability, power, and durability to compare to him. Some guys could box better. Some guys were more powerful pound for pound, but not all three together. It reminds me a little bit of him, Canelo Alvarez, but Hagler was better. He had more fire than Canelo, I think, is more methodical. Of course, people think of the Hearns and Leonard fights when they think of Hagler. It doesn't get any better than the Hearns fight, as I think pretty much everybody knows, just utter mayhem for 2+ rounds. I think that fight made Hagler a legend. It sort of pushed him over the edge. And the Leonard fight was his personal bitter disappointment. He was so bitter at the decision that he never fought again after that fight. I remember a lot of other fights, though, knockouts of guys like Vito Antuofermo, Mustafa Hamsho, Tony Simpson, Wilfred Cipion, Juan Roldan, John Mugabe. It's a long list. These performances by Hagler were just breathtaking. His ability to just destroy high-quality opponents was really something to behold. Finally, I have great memories of Hagler, which are the gifts that these guys leave us. And he was particularly generous in that regard. He wasn't exactly in the public eye recently, but he'll definitely be missed.
Yeah, certainly. And he was always a great person in person as well. I was just watching that Mugabe fight a few days ago. And I mean, just an incredible back and forth war. I don't know how. I mean, it would have taken a baseball bat to hurt Hagler in the ring. And I think the fact that he was so disappointed with what happened with the Leonard fight in 1987 that he retired and never came back speaks to the kind of discipline that he had. He certainly practiced what he preached. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family. Let's talk about the back to boxing, about the super flyweight unification bout that took place last Saturday. Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Gonzalez. Estrada won the WBC and WBA bouts via controversial decision, or it seems to be a lot of controversy. Mike, did you have Estrada winning?
First of all, real quick, it was a great fight. It lived up to the billing, which is not something that we say too often. They threw a combined 2,529 punches, which apparently is a division record, according to CompuBox. That's a big number. As far as the scoring goes, I scored it a draw, but I'm okay with the decision. I thought it was a close fight that could have gone either way. I thought Estrada boxed a little bit better than Gonzalez, but Chocolatito, who just never stops coming, probably landed more punches that caught my eye. I think a case could be made for both guys. I was at the first fight, which was a great fight, but this one was better. I hope they do it one more time.
Yeah, I didn't score it. I just sort of eyeballed it, and I noted a few things in terms of action. As you said, I mean, this was a pretty solid fight. They went back and forth. The 12th round was great, but for some reason, I couldn't help but be reminded of Leonard Duran 3. Now, that fight wasn't fun to watch at all. Certainly not anywhere like the fight we saw on Saturday night. But the parallel here is I saw the age, I guess, in both fighters. Juan Francisco Estrada, he's lost quite a bit on his fastball, as has Roman Gonzalez. And I think it's a testament to their greatness that they were able to summon the kind of will needed to go at each other like that for 12 rounds. So kudos to both. Now, that said, I thought Gonzalez edged it. Again, I didn't score it, but just watching it, it looked like he was stronger, landed the cleaner punches, dictated the pace. But it was a close fight. And I think a third fight is warranted. But Mike, I don't know about you, but we may want a third fight. We want may perhaps see Rungvisai get back in the mix again. But I don't know how much more fights these guys have left. I mean, these are wars that they're having.
Well, I thought that Gonzalez was done when he lost back-to-back fights to Rungvisai in 2017. Right. So the guy's just a physical marvel. I suppose I didn't really think too much about the age, and if they have declined at all, to do what they, like you just pointed out, to do what they did is pretty remarkable. I don't know, maybe that was more heart than ability, but it was a pretty high level of both.
Yeah, it was certainly a high level of ability. As well. And with that, let's jump right into our first interview. You saw him last Saturday on Showtime, impressively stopping Ronald Ellis in the main event. One of the very best at 168, undefeated, two-time super middleweight champion, David Benavidez. David, first, congratulations on a strong performance Saturday night. You've had more time to think about it. How do you think you did?
I feel good. I feel really good, man. I feel like I went in there. I got all my combinations out. I think I gave a pretty entertaining fight. There's obviously always things that you could fix in the gym, and there's things I always want to get better at. But I give myself a B+, man. I feel like I had a solid performance.
In trying to get inside the mind of a fighter, what are you thinking when you're beating up on an opponent like that?
At the time, the only thing that's going in my mind is, you just keep trying to do as much as you can to get the knockout or the stoppage. Ronald Ellis, he's a tough competitor, tough fighter, and he didn't want to go down, man. But, this is my job. At the end of the day, it's either I get him or he gets me. So, there's really no compassion, or I don't feel bad about it. That's just the way it is in boxing.
Did you feel him wearing down gradually? And if so, how can you tell when that happens?
The first 6 rounds, he was putting up a pretty good poker face, but I knew I had the advantage on the power. So, I knew if I kept, going upstairs and then switching back down to the body, eventually I was going to catch him with a good shot, or I was going to catch him with a good liver shot. And I could tell every time I'd pull his hand down and throw that right hand over the guard, I could tell like he was a little bit hurt, because there's only so much clean punches you could take like that. So by the time I got to the 6th round, I think it was the first time I really hurt him. And then in the 8th round, I caught him with a couple uppercuts, and I didn't see him responding, as much as he was in the beginning. He looked more like if he was hurt or he was rocked. So I knew I had him by the time the 8th round hit. I knew I had him.
Got it. Ellis actually said afterward that you never hurt him and the ref shouldn't have stopped the fight. What's your reaction to that? I
mean, what is he going to say? I mean, that's probably the best thing he's going to say. I mean, I could tell he was rocked. His corner knew he was rocked, and the referee, I wanted to stop it a couple of times, so they kept walking to his corner and checking him. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's what a fighter's going to say. He's not really going to say that, especially if he'll stop by the referee. I'm surprised he didn't say that he got robbed and he was winning all the rounds.
Okay.
You had no problems making way for this fight, and you looked really fit. Did you feel as good as you looked?
Yeah, I felt really good. I just felt like this is the lightest I've ever been for the fight. I think at the day of the fight, I weighed 178. I usually gain like 15, 16 pounds, but this time I just wanted to see, how it would feel at 10-pound mark. And I felt really good. I feel like this is probably the most I've thrown in a while. It was, crazy combinations, and I was throwing punches, punches and bunches all night, and I did not get tired one bit. So I felt really good, man. I felt really good. It's probably one of the best fights I've been in a long time.
That's good to hear. I know you caught a lot of flack for the fight against Angulo, missing weight for that, but I'm guessing after your performance on Saturday that you'll never let that happen again.
Yeah, exactly. And, I had a great camp in Big Bear, and I was up there for 3 months. And, I kind of found a diet that worked for me because I wasn't really starving and eating a lot, but I was eating the right foods and drinking a lot of water. So, it didn't even really feel like a diet, and I got the weight off pretty easy. So if I keep following that plan, that diet plan, and the nutrition, I feel like I'm going to be at 168 for a long, long time.
You're only 24. You're obviously still growing as an all-around boxer. Were you working on anything in particular in this fight?
Well, this fight, I was just trying to mix it up a little more. I think my main focus on this one was throwing a lot of combinations, because, that's one thing I want to really improve in, throwing punches and bunches. And I feel like for the fans, too, they get more excited once you throw a lot of shots like that. So that's really what I worked on the whole camp. And I just feel like if I keep that going with, the jab I throw and the body shots, I could be a very dangerous fighter.
I think you already are a very dangerous fighter. You sort of just answered this question, but maybe there's other areas too. What areas of your game would you like to see improvement?
I would like to improve more defense this time. I think when I go back to the camp, I'm gonna work a little bit more on defense. I didn't feel the punches or nothing, but I feel like some punches, a little bit more punches were getting through than I'm used to having punches get through. So I feel like definitely have to go back and work a little bit more on defense. And I feel like for the next fight, I want to go to the body right away. I feel like this fight, it took me kind of like halfway to go to the body, to go down to the body. So, next fight, probably just be more persistent at the body from the beginning.
Yeah, I remember that. Okay. So everybody talks about your ability to impose yourself physically on your opponents. You're just stronger, more powerful than everybody. But do you feel there's other aspects of your game that are maybe underappreciated?
Yeah, I feel like my jab is really underappreciated. I feel like I have one of the best jabs in boxing. But also, I think just the variety and the way I throw combinations is very unlike anybody else who's in the super middleweight division. It's not an easy thing to do. That's why a lot of people don't really do it. But I feel like my combination punching is really underrated.
Good.
Yeah, we know that you're in a waiting game now in terms of your future, but you seem to be okay with that. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I feel pretty. I'm just ready for whatever opportunity comes my way. I'm ready for the big opportunities, but also if no big opportunities come, I still gotta stay patient. Wait for my turn, and when our big moment comes, make a splash. But I think the good thing that's, with the good thing that's on my side is that, I got time on my side. I just turned 24 years old. So, I'm the youngest, top 3 middleweight, top 5 super middleweight in the division right now. So I feel like time is on my side. But, whenever opportunity comes, I'm going to be ready. But if they want to, if they want me to take it a little bit slow, and, I'm definitely fine with anything,
Now, if you could choose one opponent, any opponent right now without, the normal considerations and everything that's going on, who would it be?
I would want to fight Caleb, but also, I wouldn't mind a fight with Charlo as well. But seeing as those guys, they're going another route right now, I think a fight like that would be right now, how possible it would be. But I feel like either Charlo or Caleb Plant would be a great fight for me.
What are your thoughts on Plant as a fighter? I know you've been asked before, I'm sure, a million times. What do you see? Because I get the sense it doesn't seem like you consider him elite.
I don't really consider him a really strong fighter, but I feel like he's a really good boxer. But still, this is, there's already bad blood right there between me and him. We really don't like each other. We made it really public. But I still feel like that's one of the fights on the table that my fans would love to see. And, he's a world champion for a reason. So me, I just having respect for boxers and boxing, I feel like it would be a great fight. Former champ versus a current champ right now would be a great fight. So I feel like, he's an all right boxer.
So you've mentioned Charlo a number of times. You said you'd like to fight him in September. It's an intriguing matchup, obviously. Do you think it's realistic given that he's a middleweight and you're a big 168-pounder?
He's not. I think he's like almost 6 foot. He's not too small. I feel like he was the one that said he was gonna come up to 168. That's how this whole conversation started. He was the one saying he's gonna come up to 168. But I feel like he could definitely make 168. I think it would be in best interest for him because in PBC right now and at 160, there's not really too much guys for him to fight. And seeing that we're both kind of like going in the same, in the same position right now, we're both looking for a bigger fight, maybe possibly with Canelo. I think it makes sense that, while we wait for the big opportunity to happen, we make our big opportunity happen amongst ourselves. And, at the end of the day, also give the fans a great fight because stylistically that would be a great fight. And I think, the fans would be more than happy to watch that fight.
I know I would. What are your thoughts on Charlo as a fighter? Strengths, weaknesses, that kind of thing.
He's a good fighter. He's a solid fighter. I've been watching Charlo for a long time, and I give my respects to him too. He's a great fighter, but at the end of the day, like I said, I want to prove that I'm the best, and whatever route I got to take, whatever fighter's willing to fight, and the fans want to see it, I'm all up for it. He's a hard fight, but in order to be a great fighter, you got to go through all the hard fighters as well. So, I think that would be an amazing fight.
There are a lot of people right now who feel Canelo Alvarez is pretty much unbeatable. Why do you think you can beat him?
I feel like I have the youth on my side, and I have a lot of supporters, and I feel like I'm unlike any other fighter Canelo's faced right now. I'm able to throw, a variety of punches. I can throw jabs, uppercuts, body shots, combinations, punches and bunches, and I love to give a good fight. I go forward. I never go backwards. So I feel like Canelo hasn't faced that in a while. And I'm much bigger than him. He's 5'8", I'm 6'2", or he's 5'9", whatever he is. But I feel like, I have a lot of advantages that I could take advantage of in a fight with Canelo. And, just because, I have the hunger and the desire to be that next star. I really want it. And I feel like once there's a fighter like that who really wants it, because for me it's not, I know you guys hear a lot of time, but it's not all about the money. For me, it's more about the glory and just doing the things I said I was going to do when I was a little kid. So that's kind of the things I'm leaning on now. And, I'm working extremely hard. I'm not just talking just to talk. I'm working. I'm putting in the work to make that happen.
What about some of these other super middleweights who are slated to fight Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant? Do you think those are going to be competitive fights?
I feel like they're all going to be competitive fights. At this level, nobody's bad. Everybody's a world champion for a reason. So I feel like they're going to be great fights, but I feel like those fighters, they don't have, the power it takes to keep Canelo off of them. Canelo, he comes forward. He loves coming forward. So you have to have, some pretty good power to keep him off of keep Canelo off of you. So I feel like that's what they like, and I feel like that's what I have. So, yeah.
You mentioned after the fight on Saturday that you could see yourself staying at 168 for 3 years, if I heard that correctly. Is that the plan right now? Can you really see yourself staying at 168 till 2024?
Yeah, there's a lot of great fights. I just have to talk to my promoters and see if these fights are actually possible to make, and I don't see why not. With this camp and the diet I had, I was on weight the whole week. I've never had a fight where I really didn't have to do nothing the whole week. I was just relaxing since Monday. So I feel like if I went the route, and, the nutrition stays the same and like how it was for this camp, it definitely is possible.
Now, have you heard anything specifically about when you might be back in the ring?
No, not as of now. But hopefully I could get back, in August or September. I feel like that would be great just to keep me busy too, and also give the fans some good fights.
David, we know you're relaxing after your great victory on Saturday, so we really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you as well for the interview. I really appreciate you guys as well.
And we're going to go right back to last Saturday's Showtime card. In the main event, the aforementioned David Benavidez remained unbeaten, stopping Ronald Ellis in 11 rounds. Mike, what was your take on Benavidez's performance?
I thought he looked terrific. Ellis was actually better than I thought he was. He had a nice jab. He connected on some nice power shots. He moved well. Honestly, he might be as good or nearly as good as guys like Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders. And in the end, Benavidez just ate him alive. He broke Ellis down with those quick, heavy tight combinations that just keep coming and coming and coming. He's very economical and very accurate. He landed 54% of his power shots, which is a really high number. He's just a big, strong machine in there. Credit to Ellis, who was unbelievably tough. I can't believe he took the punishment that he took and finished the fight on his feet. But he really got beat up by a special fighter.
Yeah, he certainly did. And that was a great performance, a steady, consistent performance where he showed his entire offensive arsenal, Benavidez, that is. Based on what you saw Saturday night, how would Benavidez fare versus Canelo Alvarez?
I would pick Canelo to win that fight, but I'd give Benavidez a chance. I think it would take one of two types of boxers to give Canelo problems. One is a special boxer, a la Floyd Mayweather. That fighter doesn't exist at or near Canelo's weight, if at any weight.
Yeah.
The other is a good boxer who can also punch hard, a la Gennady Golovkin. I think Benavidez is the latter type fighter. He isn't as advanced as Triple G, but he's bigger and stronger.
And he's still young.
He's young, and he's certainly naturally bigger than Canelo is. Benavidez mentioned a concern that I have. He said he wants to work on his defense, which means he can be hit. And Canelo could hurt anyone if he could hit him, right?
Right.
I'll finish with this, though. If Canelo wants to fight Benavidez, he should do it sooner rather than later, because the longer he waits, the harder it's going to be to beat him. I think it's a good fight now. If he waits too long, he might lose.
Yeah, I mean, Benavidez is only going to get better. And just talking to him, you can tell he can't wait to get back in the gym and just continue to work on his craft. Who would you like to see him face next?
Any of the top super middleweights. He said he wants Jermall Charlo in September. I'm not sure that fight makes too much sense for Charlo. Why take a risk like that against a bigger guy who doesn't have a title? But I absolutely love the fight. I hope it somehow does happen. It would be fantastic from a fan perspective. I keep thinking of Chris Eubank Jr. I know he went down to middleweight for his last fight, but he had been fighting at 68. There actually aren't that many great options at 168. But the bottom line for me is I think Benavidez should be fighting for a title. The Plant fight has been brewing for a long time, but it looks like Plant is going to get Canelo in September. At least there's a good chance of that happening. So for me, everything points to a Canelo Benavidez fight. Maybe next Cinco de Mayo, maybe Mexican Independence Day in September, something like that. But I hope by the end of next year, he's in the ring, shares a ring with Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, well, this was a WBC title eliminator. The title's held by Canelo Alvarez. Right. So, maybe that happens sooner than we think. Who knows? Now, in the co-feature, lightweight contender Isaac Cruz won a 12-round unanimous decision over Matias Romero. Lots of folk, including myself, were predicting a KO win for Cruz. Mike, what was your take on his victory?
Well, what stood out for me was that Romero was better than I thought he would be. I should have stated this last week. I should state this anytime you have a fighter come from a place like Central America or South America who we're not too familiar with. You just don't know how good these guys are. You just have no idea how they're going to perform. You just sort of guess by watching a few of their fights on YouTube, that kind of thing, but you don't really know them that well. This guy turned out to be good. He was a good boxer. He was elusive. I thought he threw enough punches to be competitive, and unfortunately, he held way too much. I think that was a negative thing from his standpoint. All that made Cruz's job difficult. He did what he does, though. He kept pushing the action. He threw a lot of punches. He landed a lot of body shots, especially toward the end of the fight, and that paid off with a victory. Did Cruz look great? No, but he got the job done, which is the bottom line.
Yeah, he did, and I completely agree on the holding. It was really excessive and kind of made the fight hard to watch. I think maybe Cruz could have pulled off a stoppage if referee Harvey Dock didn't allow Romero to hold as much as he did. And I think Romero did well, given the fact that he took the fight on short notice. He boxed well, but I feel the holding impeded a lot of the action that we could have seen. How far away is Cruz from challenging for a world title?
That was a title eliminator, no? So
this was.
So now I guess I think he's probably ready. The question is whether he can get a shot. He'd certainly be a great opponent, for example, for Tank Davis. Imagine Cruz attacking Tank like that.
Man.
I mean, that would be hugely explosive.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think he's a good opponent for a guy like Rolando Romero or Robert Easter, or any, obviously, for Teofimo Lopez too, for pretty much anybody. I think he's there. He's a viable opponent for anyone. Whether he wins, I don't know, but I think he's earned the right to give it a shot.
Yeah, certainly. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what's next for him. Now, in the televised opener, 154-pound action. Unlike Cruz versus Romero, this was a fight many expected to go the distance. Instead, Terrell Gausha knocks out Jamonte Clark in 2 rounds. A huge win for Gausha. Mike, were you as surprised as I was at the outcome?
I was a little surprised. I think of Clark as a solid guy. He drew with Sebastian Fundora recently, which says something.
A lot of people thought he won that fight.
Right. And Gausha hadn't really done that much recently. He was 1-2-1 in his last 4 fights, with clear decision losses to Erislandy Lara in his only title shot, and Erickson Lubin, in my opinion. It just seemed like he never lived up to that Olympic level standard. And then this happened. That was a hell of a knockout. That first counter right was just monstrous. I don't think the fight should have continued after that, to be honest. Did you see how happy Gausha was afterward? He knew that pumped life back into his career. That was just a huge knockout for him.
Yeah, huge win for him. You mentioned that the knockout pumped life back into his career. Where does Gausha go from here?
Well, apparently, I checked. Apparently, he wasn't ranked at all going into that fight. I have to believe he will be afterward in at least one of the sanctioning bodies. I don't know whether he gets a title shot right away, but he's in a much better position to take on another big name guy now. And if he can win that fight, maybe one more. Who knows? Maybe he's back in the title hunt. I think just getting the opportunity to fight for a belt would be a nice accomplishment for him based on what he's been through in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think we'll see a better Gausha going forward. Just off that had to be a huge confidence booster, that knockout win. But 154-pound division is the gift that keeps on giving. Now in the standings, nothing's changed as far as our prediction league. I am 8-1-1. Mike is 7-2-1. We'll see what the coming weeks bring. And speaking of let's bring in our next guest for this week's episode. He is one of the biggest names in the sport and also one of the most exciting, a 2-time welterweight champion on the hunt for a 3rd strap, Showtime, Shawn Porter. Shawn, first things first, how are you? How are you and the family doing?
We're doing great, man. Thank you for asking.
That's good to hear. And also, congratulations on being appointed the NBC boxing analyst for the Olympics. Did they reach out to you? How did that happen?
Yeah, no, they reached out to me. They had seen what I had done in November and December with NBC and Ring City, USA, and I think that they thought that I might be a good analyst and commentator for the amateur Olympic boxing, and I'm super excited about it, man. That's where I come from. I come from the amateur background. I come from the Olympic background, so I'm excited to be a part of that.
That's very cool. So you've been on Inside PBC Boxing. You've covered fights ringside. Now you'll be doing that at the Olympics. Was this something you saw happening when you first got into boxing?
I wouldn't say this is something I saw happening when I got into boxing, but commentary and TV has been an interest of mine since I was a preteen. I don't even know why, to be honest with you. I've always watched football, and I love football, and so I don't know why, but I just thought that I would want to do this someday. And when I got my first start in 2018 on the Inside PBC Boxing Show, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what it was going to be like. But everyone says to me, you're a natural, and you're just going to grow really quick in this. And I was like, I've been wanting to do this my whole life. So, I'm happy that I am as good as I thought I would be to this point, and I intend to get a whole lot better.
So I assume that this is something that you'll continue to do after your actual boxing career is over.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some other things in the works for when I'm done competing, but commentary and TV and radio is definitely going to be there probably until the end of time for me.
Oh, Now, you also have a boxing promotional company. Do you see yourself doing that as well when it's all said and done, or concentrating on that?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure. My dad does have a few fighters that he has signed at this point, and they're young guys that he expects to grow into top contenders and champions. So I don't know if that's the route I'm going to go with my dad. But my dad is always going to be my business partner. So it seems like whatever he's into, I'm into. So it is definitely possible for me to stay in that on that side of boxing as well.
You know, a lot of times they say blood and money and blood don't mix, or what have you. How have you guys been able to sort of navigate all the landmines and all the troubles that you've encountered in the game of boxing?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I think we're two pretty intelligent individuals, to say the least. I think that my dad, he kind of knows what he wants and what he needs, and I know how to cater to that. And I think I've figured out a way to, express my wants and needs to him and make it possible for him to cater to me as well. I don't think that enough father and son duels or enough family members are able to figure out that recipe, but my dad and I, we really have figured it out.
Now, is it difficult for you to juggle everything? We've talked about the ringside commentary for Ring City and for PBC, and now you've got the Olympics coming up. How do you manage to do all of that and still remain an elite fighter?
I think it's pretty easy for me. The reason why it's easy for me is because everything that I have physically was God-given. And for me, I put most of the work is done for me mentally. And so I think that when I'm able to itemize everything and create times to get everything done and cater to everything, it's easy for me to stay in shape, because that's easy. It's easy for me to train. I can train in the hotel room, in the parking lot, and get ready for a fight, because that's where I come from. My dad and I, we trained for multiple national tournaments and won multiple national tournaments training in our backyard. So yeah, it's all God given, and for me, it's just a mental thing. Once the mental taps in, the rest takes care of itself. So I don't have any worries about being able to prioritize boxing and competing when the time comes. And I'm very much so looking forward to getting back in the ring again.
Which leads us to our next question. Have you heard anything about when you might actually be in the ring again?
My dad and I, we're talking about it. We're trying to figure it out, and we're trying to be patient and not make the wrong move. My dad knows what I want, and I've expressed that to the world. If it's not Errol Spence Jr., if it's not Manny Pacquiao, if it's not Terrence Crawford, then I really don't want to get back in the ring. However, my dad is starting to realize that those fights may not be the fights that could come soon enough for us, and we may have to get in the ring with someone else. So I think, again, going back to the state of mind, I think mentally I'm preparing to I have to prepare myself to get in the ring if it's not one of those guys. And with that being said, I think I'm just kind of taking my time to get back into that. But I would say, I tweeted out to Terrence Crawford and also to Top Rank that I will be ready at the end of May. I'm hearing that they're looking at having Terrence Crawford fight at the end of May. Don't forget that I'm here, and I can be ready to be your next opponent. So if it's not him, I think I still will intend on getting back in the ring in May.
Didn't Crawford respond to that by saying something like "stand by"? What did you make of that response?
Yeah, I've heard that before, from him, and I don't care for it. I was talking to someone today. I said, I'm doing the best I can to not lose what I would consider a good friend. He's a good dude, and is not too many guys like him in the sport. And for us to have the kind of friendship that we've had for some time, what I don't want to do is say something that bothers him to the point that he doesn't want to be my friend moving forward beyond boxing. And I think that that's one thing most of these guys don't realize is that we have lives after this sport that we need to be prepared for. And I think guys are just looking at championships and they're looking at, what perks they're going to get from this fight, perks they're going to get from that fight, but then no one prepares for life after boxing. And, that's something that my dad taught me well before I became a professional, so just saying that to say I'm doing the best I can to try to create a fight without trying to lose a friend at the same time. So I do consider Terence Crawford a good dude and a friend of mine. So I'm treading, man, but I'm doing the best I can to tread and make a fight happen, but at the same time not make him feel, disrespected and say, no, Shawn turned his back on me. I don't want to be his friend anymore.
So I don't know if you're going to want to answer this then, but I believe you recently said that if you guys did fight, you would stop him. Is that true? And if so, why do you think so?
I don't know where you heard that, but I mean, I can speak on every fighter. Every fighter's plan is to stop whoever it is they're getting in the ring with.
Right.
I will speak to myself now. We are in the midst of trying to develop the power that I used to have. I do know that over the years of moving down to 147, there was power that I lost when I was at the higher divisions at 165 and 154. So over the course of the last year or two, we say, you know what, if we're going to gain muscle and gain that weight, let's just gain it and then deal with the weight loss when we have to. But we got to get this muscle back and we got to get this power back. So with that being said, I'm looking at stopping whoever it is I get in the ring with and until I'm done with this sport.
Now, that fight, him coming back in May, you hope that they don't forget about you when they're negotiating for that fight for him. Do you see it happening, though? What percentage chance would you give it?
Oh, Lordy. I don't know. I think, and I also think that there's a lot of different possibilities to making a fight happen between myself and Terence Crawford. I think at this point now everybody's forgotten that WBO ranked me the number one contender for his title, which means I'm a mandatory fight, which means you can't just go on and fight someone else. You have to deal with the mandatory. Now you can pay the mandatory off and go and fight someone else, or you do a purse bid to make the fight happen with the mandatory, So I think that is another thing that we have at this point as a advantage is my dad and I, we understand the business and we know the business and we can't quote unquote be screwed by the business, So other fighters don't understand that and they lose their mandatory position and don't know how the fight didn't happen and how they didn't get paid because the fight didn't happen, So I think that collectively I'm just doing everything I can to manage the business, manage the friendship, manage the training and everything else that I got going on right now in life. So it makes every day interesting and it makes every day, gives you something to strive for every day as well.
So you mentioned two other names, Errol Spence Jr. and Manny Pacquiao. Is it safe to say those are if you aren't able to get a Terence Crawford fight, those are the next two names on your list?
Yeah, those are the next two names on the list, but it's really hard to say right now what's going to come next for me. I think that once I won my fight against Sebastian Formella, I think that it was Espen Stone. Hey, your next fight's going to be Errol Spence Jr. And then out of nowhere, the WBO ranked me number one and made me a mandatory. And it's like, okay, maybe this fight with Terence Crawford could happen. And then you see after Errol Spence Jr. fights, he's not going to want to fight again until the summertime. And, we're trying to be patient and allow that to run its course. But, we're hearing that he doesn't want to fight me and, and he's considering other options as well. You take a look that they made WBA made Ugas a champion. So, it's a really interesting but difficult spot for me right now because it's like I want those big fights, but I don't have a world title. So, those guys are they're trying to play that game and jump over me. So it's really hard to say. Manny's what they call a champion of recess right now. So I think if anything, there's no telling when he's going to come back, and I doubt he's going to want to come back against me. So not really sure what's going to happen right now.
Got it. You and Spence had that classic welterweight unification war in 2019. We saw Spence come back last December and beat Danny Garcia. What were your thoughts on his performance in that fight?
He looked great, man. I was happy to see him come back. I was happy to see that he was able to operate the way we've seen him operate in the past. So I was very, very happy for him. And again, to go through what he went through and then get in the ring and dominate Danny Garcia the way that he did. Nobody's ever beat Danny Garcia like that. Not myself or Keith Thurman, and there's been a couple of close fights that Danny won, and those guys didn't perform as well as Errol Spence Jr. did, So I think that speaks a lot to Errol Spence Jr.'s abilities and its preparation as well, which to this point it looks like it's top tier.
Right. Is there anything you would do differently in the rematch against Spence to leave no doubts as far as the scoring goes?
Yeah, I think box a little more from the outside, and I think go to his body a lot more. I think that was something else that I kind of lost through the course of that fight, and if anything else, don't leave it up to the judges.
Now, another rematch that I've seen fans talk about and that you sort of alluded to is you versus Keith Thurman. Thurman has also mentioned that he'd like to fight you again. Would that be a match that interests you?
Keith has been through some things, man, and he hasn't been through things in the ring. I just, when I take a look at what we did in 2016, I thought it was amazing. We didn't really, for the sake of words, fight for a rematch, but the rematch never happened. And then, it just seems like since 2016, my career has progressed and gotten bigger and better. And it seems like he hit us, he stalled out, and I don't think that he's at the level that I'm at this point, and he's only got one loss. So I know that seems or sounds weird, but, I've put in work and I have not taken any steps back. And, when I say that, and I say that, hey, Keith, you're not on my level or you don't deserve a fight with me, I'm just speaking to what I've done and continue to do since 2016, and he has not been that consistent, So for him to think that he can fight, like twice in the last 3 years and then get in a fight in the ring with me, I don't buy that. I don't think that is, I don't think that's good.
Do you think Thurman's the same fighter he was when you guys went to war back in 2016? I
neither of us are. We're really not. We both have grown and matured. I got a feeling the fight would still be amazing. It still would be exciting, and I think it would be amazing and exciting because of how amazing and exciting the first fight was. But I think that the makeup of the fight now, I think it will be a little bit different. He and I both. I know I can speak for myself. I'm much smarter now than I was when we fought. I'm prepared to do things a little differently now than when we fought. And I got a feeling he's the same way. I don't think that his power is the same. I think that that's something that's decreased. I don't think he's really worked on his power, and I think that he's lost a lot of the power, the God-given power that he had, especially back in the day when he was knocking out everybody. So I think mentally we're different as well. Just, over the course of time, you do grow and mature and, things are done differently. So we're both different fighters now. I think that it still will be an exciting fight.
There's a new crop of welterweights on the rise. Jaron Ennis, Saimanis Stanionis, Jesus Ramos are just three guys who are reported to be returning to the ring very soon. Have any of these guys caught your eye?
Oh, yeah. All of the young guys, especially I do this podcast, so it's like I got to keep my eyes open to what's going on just to report it on the Welterweight Podcast. But two guys in particular, Virgil Ortiz and Jaron Ennis, I mean, they are flat out electrifying fighters, exciting fighters in different ways. You know, their excitement comes in different ways, but they both have that it factor, and they both are special fighters. So I've definitely paid attention to them, as well as all of the young guys right there, 130 and 135. That's turning into one of the highest divisions in boxing.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of 147, you think you'll end your career at 47, or is there a chance that you'd move up?
You know, I don't know. It hasn't been a tug of war with me to fight at 154 or choose between fighting at 154 and 147. However, I do know that there are some really good fights in me at 154. There's some really good fights for me, and I know that I can hold my own at that weight. You know, so the thing is, there's so many amazing fights that can be made at 147. And, you know, I know that I'm not looking at being in this too much longer. And I know that my dad doesn't want me to be in this as a fighter too much longer. So there's really no telling at this point.
You brought up your podcast, the Porter Way podcast, which we enjoy and I think is caught on very, very quickly. What have you learned about doing podcasts about the sport? Has it changed your perspective on boxing at all?
No, I don't think so. I think if anything, when it comes to the Porter Way podcast, we laugh about it just about every week when we record, because I always find myself I'm on the inside, the quote unquote, I'm on the quote unquote inside, so to speak. So it's like I know so much, and there really are times where it's like you just can't say that. You just can't expose this or that, you know. And it's like, man, here's the best time to do it, you know. But it's like, no, you can't do that, you know. So it's a lot of fun, and I think that I think that that's why people enjoy my podcast, because I think that I'm able to give people a insight that they don't normally get. And I think the other thing too, I think people have grown to know me as an honest interview. Everything that I say is genuine and real and honest. And I think that people know that enough about me to know that whatever I'm speaking about on the Porter Way podcast, more than likely it's damn near 100% accurate. And if it's not far off, you know. So I mean, people want to know what I think about certain matchups and things like that. And I'm like, damn, man, I don't want to say the wrong thing and offend anybody or anything like that, but I have to do my job, you know. And I think that even with treading on those thin lines, I think people still are able to respect what's coming out of my mouth and appreciate it. And then I got two other guys who are just funny and right. You know, they're entertaining, and it makes for a really good show.
Yeah, Carson and Anthony, and let's not forget Shawn Zintel too, who's always fun when you guys have him on. But when you're talking to them, and you kind of brought this up, do you kind of have to hold back? Perhaps they say something and you know, like, okay, that wouldn't happen like that, or this wouldn't happen like that. How do you balance that, knowing what you know as opposed to what they know?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the most touchy subjects in boxing is the judging. I think that people who have not watched this sport for a significant amount of years don't really understand the scoring. And so when you don't understand the scoring, you look to an expert like, hey, why did this happen and how did this happen? And it's like, those are moments where I have to explain it, but I can't offend a state athletic commission. I can't offend a particular ref or judge. I can't offend boxing, so to speak, you know. And so those are the moments where it's like, we know, you know, but just let it go on this one. And you know, maybe in the future you might have to touch on it if, you know, this or that happens, you know. So I think that really is the biggest thing. I think that when you have the insight to what these judges are doing or thinking or what they possibly may have been doing before a fight and things like that. I think that, I have the insight there that I don't always project on the podcast, simply because I understand that I have a role as a radio personality, but I also have a role as an athlete, and also, my dignity and things like that as well, that are always on the line.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. In closing, Shawn, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but have you heard anything about when you might return to the ring? Are you looking at May?
I am looking right now today. If I had to tell you guys, hey, make sure you watch my next fight, it'll be in May, if not May, June.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we can't wait for it. Shawn, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us. We wish you the best, and we can't wait to have you back on. Can't wait to see you in the ring soon.
Thank you, man. I'm glad I was able to make this happen with y'all. Have a good one.
Thanks, Shawn.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe. This week, we are going to unveil our personal top 5 PBC fights of the past 5 years. Of course, we're going to go from number 5 to number 1. So, Mike, we'll start with you. Who kicks off your list?
Okay, so I went with not relative, I don't know if obscure is the right word, but a relatively obscure fight to start with. It just really stood out in my mind. Brandon Figueroa versus Julio Ceja. First of all, I hate the fact that Ceja came in 4.5 pounds over the 122-pound limit. And if I were advising Figueroa, I actually probably would have advised him not to take that fight. That said, that fight was absolutely freaking insane. I haven't seen too many fights in which guys landed as many clean, just brutal punches more than this one. I mean, it was just like nonstop the entire fight. I was just amazed that they remained on their feet. And the fact that Figueroa, a junior featherweight, technically was fighting a junior lightweight made it even more amazing. What heart that guy has. Say whatever else you want to say about him, but absolutely no questioning the guy's heart. That fight I'll always remember that fight.
That was a great fight. Were we there? Was that in L.A. September? I feel like that was on the Spence Porter undercard. I don't know if it was or what. I feel like it was out on the West Coast.
Yeah. I was there. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It was fun times. I certainly remember that. And I remember how brutal that was. And my number 5 was pretty brutal too. It occurred back in February 2017. Heavyweights Dominic Breazeale and Ugono faced off in a 10-rounder at Legacy Arena in Birmingham, Alabama. This fight was memorable because as a foodie, it was my first time in Birmingham, and man, do they know how to cook out there. So many great spots. It was just wonderful. And then, of course, the return of Deonte Wilder versus Chris Arreola in the main event. But Breazeale versus Ugono stole the show. For those who haven't seen it, find it on YouTube. I mean, a brutal back-and-forth war between two heavy-handed big men who were just letting their fists fly. First, Breazeale dropped Ugono in the 3rd round. He barely made it to his feet, but then seconds later, his shots were forcing Breazeale to hold on. The back and forth just kept going. And then in the 4th round, huge right hand drops Breazeale. It looks like we're on our way to a huge upset, but then Breazeale roars back in the 5th, flooring Ugono twice to win by TKO. This should have been a Fight of the Year candidate. Not sure how it wasn't, but just brilliant action all around.
Yeah, I had sort of forgotten about that fight. You reminded me, so I went back and watched it. Wow, that was like heavyweight boxing action at its best. Maybe not the highest level of skill, but heavyweight action at its best. It was really fun to watch that fight.
Yeah, bombs away. All right, number 4. Who should go first, you or I?
Go for it. I did the last.
All right. My number 4 is the rematch between Jermell Charlo and Tony Harrison. December 2019, a headliner of a fantastic card on Fox. There had been a lot of trash talk in the lead up to this fight between Charlo and Harrison. Harrison had won a close decision in their first encounter a year before, and there was a lot on the line. This was one of those rare times when the sequel turned out to be better than the original. It just reminded me of those 90 fights. It was like a throwback to me, like James Toney versus Michael Nunn or something like that. When you have two elite operators who just went to work and made adjustment after adjustment, little shifts in momentum. So it was a brilliant battle. It wasn't rock'em sock'em, for the entire fight, but just a brilliant battle between two top-notch operators. Charlo scored an early knockdown in the second, but Harrison came back and built up a points lead. But Jermell Charlo, like I like to say, has a lot of tricks in his bag. And toward the 8th or 9th round, he began turning things in his favor. And then in the 11th, he dropped Harrison twice, forced a stoppage, and become champion once more. I may have to go back and watch this fight again now that I'm thinking about it.
Talk about a high level of ability. You know what stands out with that fight for me is that Charlo, the statement he made in that fight was, "I'm one of the best fighters in the world." Yeah. I think he sort of went over, reached a new level with that victory. That was a special performance, special fight.
Sure was. Who you got for number 4?
Okay, so this one also may be a little unusual because in the end it ended emphatically for one guy, but as long as it lasted, it was really breathtaking. I'm talking about Leo Santa Cruz versus Tank Davis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking while watching this fight live with these guys just winging punches, like, whoa, this is just crazy. Something's got to give here, right? Santa Cruz was Santa Cruz. You know, he fought aggressively, threw a lot of punches. It was almost as if he was thinking, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging, which is pretty much what happened. We'll remember the epic uppercut that took out Santa Cruz, but we shouldn't forget that the whole fight was really, really fun to watch. I was definitely on the edge of my seat the entire fight.
Yeah, it was a great fight. Lots of back and forth in that fight. And then the knockout just came out of nowhere. It was like things were heating up. Santa Cruz it looked like he was doing really, really well. And then boom, Davis dropped that hammer and the fight was over. That was certainly one of the best fights of 2020 and one of the best fights of the past 5 years for PBC. Now let's go to our number 3. You kick it off.
Okay. Keith Thurman versus Shawn Porter.
What a fight.
Yeah, I realized during my research for this segment that I could have just gone with Shawn Porter's last 5 fights, which says a lot about him. He's just always fun to watch. The Ugas fight maybe would be the only exception where it wasn't quite as funny, but even that was a good fight.
Yeah.
So Thurman Porter was really, really fun to watch. If you remember, it was back and forth war in which both guys were pushed to their limits. And again, you have to keep in mind the level of ability, which we keep talking about. These guys both really know what they're doing in there.
Yeah.
So these are just 2 excellent boxers who left everything into the ring after 12 grueling rounds. And do you think it was close? According to CompuBox, Porter outlanded Thurman 236 to 235.
Wow.
Yeah, every fight should be like that. Really fun fight to watch.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was a brutal fight, and both of them, I mean, showed so much that night in terms of skill, but more so just will. I was waiting for one of them to bend, but both of them refused to bend to each other's will. They just went to war. Very impressive. To be honest with you, there were no losers on that night. You know, Thurman won the split decision, but there were no losers as far as I'm concerned. That fight elevated both of them. And the same thing for my number 3, which of course includes Shawn Porter. It occurred in September 2019, a welterweight unification battle between IBF champ Errol Spence Jr. and Porter held a WBC title. Packed crowd at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. What more can you say about this fight? Easily the best 147-pound unification since Leonard versus Hearns. It was just an incredible back and forth between 2 fighters intent on going to war. Spence sealed the deal with the knockdown in the 11th, but this was one of those rare battles between elite prime guys where they throw caution to the wind and just go mano a mano.
Well, I'm going to be talking more about that fight in a minute.
Okay.
I was there, and that's another unforgettable fight.
Okay, all right. So where are we then? We're at number 2, or?
Yep, number 2.
Okay, all right. Is it my turn?
Go for it.
Okay, well, my number 2 took place in September 2016. 2 undefeated fighters at that time, Robert Easter Jr. versus Richard Comey for the vacant IBF lightweight title in Reading, Pennsylvania. This was another war between 2 extremely hungry cats, back and forth to the end. Comey scored a flash knockdown in the 8th when Easter's glove touched the canvas following a hard left hook, but then Easter nearly stopped Comey in the 12th, landing a vicious right hand at the beginning of the round that caused Comey's legs to sag, but the Ghanaian gamely made it out of the frame, although he came up on the wrong end of a 12-round split decision. Mike, it's been 5 years, and I still love a rematch between these 2.
I realize about Comey, based on this discussion and watching his last few fights, no matter what happens with him, he brings drama.
Yeah.
Either he's the victim or he's the one that's victimizing. But really, really fun fighter to watch.
He certainly is. All right, your turn.
Okay. My number 2 is Deonte Wilder versus Luis Ortiz 1, the first of their 2 fights. Now, one important aspect of a great fight are ebbs and flows, in my opinion. We got used to seeing Wilder destroy one opponent after another with that power of his, without taking too much punishment himself, generally. This fight was different. Wilder puts Ortiz down in the 5th, and it seems like, the end was near at that point. Then in the 7th, Ortiz hurts Wilder badly, and all of a sudden we might have a big upset on our hands. In the end, Wilder survives and stops Ortiz in just a wild 10th round.
Yeah.
And remember, this was a huge fight. Wilder took a big step in his career with that performance. So when you combine the action with the magnitude of the fight, that one was just an incredible fight.
Immense. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a second. Let's go to number 1. Mike, floor is yours.
So my number 1 is your number 2, and vice versa, as it turns out. We didn't know this actually going into this segment. So my number 1 is Shawn Porter versus Errol Spence.
Yeah.
Once again, to me, the magnitude of a fight adds immeasurably to the quality of a fight. This one had nonstop action. It was an enormous fight. Spence more or less made it a fight of the year level brawl because he decided to fight Porter's fight, if you recall. He turned it into a back alley brawl, albeit a very high level back alley brawl. It almost backfired on Spence because the scoring was so close. I mean, he could have lost that fight, but he had his hand raised. But I think the real winners in that fight were the fans, because that was a really just nonstop action, fun fight to watch.
Oh, it certainly was. I mean, it was a great night. It was a great card. And you already heard my thoughts on that fight on my list, and 1 and 2 are interchangeable for me as far as I'm concerned. Now, before I get to my number 1, I want to shout out the following fights, which didn't make the cut, but had me thinking really hard. Leo Santa Cruz versus Carl Frampton, the first one. Lamont Peterson versus Sergey Lipinets. You mentioned Thurman versus Porter. Tank versus Santa Cruz. Victor Ortiz versus Andre Berto. Jermall Charlo versus Sergey Derevyanchenko. Just a couple months ago, Angelo Leo versus Stephen Fulton, Jared Hurd versus Austin Trout, Kell Brook versus Errol Spence, Tony Harrison versus Jared Hurd, Badu Jack versus James DeGale, Badu Jack versus Adonis Stevenson, Lara versus Hurd, and Pacquiao versus Thurman. Those were all great fights. But my number 1, which you discussed a little while ago, took place on a nippy night in New York, Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Deontay Wilder making the 6th defense of his title against the toughest challenger of his pro career, Luis Ortiz. I mean, the energy at the Barclays that night was just incredible. It matched what was taking place in the ring perfectly. Wilder scored the big knockdown in the 5th, but then Ortiz had him rocked in the 7th, nearly put him away. And I remember, and I think I've discussed this before, I remember the 8th round being really tense. You could hear a pin drop in the crowd. Many of them were on their feet expecting Ortiz to put Wilder away, but then in the 9th there was just something. It was almost palpable. Midway through the round, Wilder had regained his senses a bit, although Ortiz appeared to be in control still. But I remember feeling like something special might happen here, and as I was thinking that, while I was wondering, like, what if Wilder miraculously came back? It was just an energy in the air because the swell began to build up, and the fans began chanting Wilder's name, Wilder, as if they could feel it too. And then 1 round later, we saw what we saw. The folks stayed around the Barclays until 3-4 a.m. just hanging out, enjoying themselves. I think that was truly one of the most fun nights, boxing nights, that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it was fun. That's the thing about Wilder is with that power, it's just, something's going to happen. It could happen at any moment, and almost always does. And you make me think that I hope that we get to see more of that sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Can't wait to see him back in the ring. And that's going to do it for our toe section. And that's going to do it for this week's show. We want to thank Shawn Porter and David Benavidez for dropping by. Be sure to like and subscribe to the PBC Podcast on whichever platform you found us on. So for myself and Mike, we'll see you next week for more boxing talk right here on the PBC Podcast.